The Seagull race attracts people from a broad sector of the community. And I think that we all share a similar passion for the ocean and for Bermuda in that regard. The Seagull race is much more than the race. It's a day when you can relax and sort of take in the aesthetic beauty of what Bermuda is. And there's no better way to do that than to go around Bermuda slowly and observe.
There's nothing really like sitting in a boat for 4 hours and all you can really do is look. So definitely you kind of take it in. And I think the experience is great because you have the wind and the waves in your face. And I think definitely you do have a better appreciation for Bermuda.
All the way to Baylor's Bay, fish and taters every single day. They used to sing and dance as they went along, singing a happy but a teasing kind of song. Yeah, man.
I started when I was 16, as soon as I was legally of age to use an outboard motor. My name is Brian Lightbourne, and I've been involved in Seagull racing for about 30 years now, and I race just for the fun of it. My first race was out of Devonshire Bay. I think it might have been the last race that was held out of Devonshire Bay. And my second race was St. George's, and I think that's when things were in transition. And then my next race after that was Long Island. And it was a wonderful experience, and I've been trying to do it every year since.
My father owned small boats and engines when he was a child, and he gave me my first Seagull when I was 13, 14. My full name is Herbert James Tatum Jr., or Charlie Brown as everybody knows me. I've been on the water all my life. I used to helmet dive, been in swimming clubs, etc. I work here at Mills Creek Marine, worked on boats for almost 30 years now. I have been involved with Seagull racing since probably about 1988. I didn't do the first race. I helped out, but I didn't have a boat or an engine. Started in '89. Finally got an engine. I bought secondhand and a beat up old boat I fixed up, and off I went. Didn't finish, but there you have it.
My name is Dr. J.J. Soares. I'm a family practitioner in Bermuda, and I build Seagull boats as a little distraction from the stresses of work. My father's name is John Soares, and he started racing out of Devonshire Bay just for fun. It was a lot of fun back then. I remember we'd follow him around with my grandparents' old wooden cabin cruiser that he built, and we'd follow him all the way around the island, watch him do the Seagull race. It had been out of Devonshire Bay for years, from the 60s, 70s initially, but it got discontinued for a number of years. Early 1990s, they restarted out of St. George's. And when the opportunity came to do it again, a friend and I pulled a boat out of the trees and did it for old time's sake. So since then, pretty well been doing it every year. And we've gone from very, very, very slow boats to faster boat now, so it's a different kind of race for us.
I think Seagull racing was born in recreation rather than functionality. As far as we understand it, the first race was in '69, and it was out of Devonshire Bay, and it was between a guy named Skeets and a guy named Ghost. These guys argued that one's dinghy was faster than the others. And obviously, if somebody thinks they have a faster boat than you and you know they don't, you have to prove it. And they had very different engines on their boats, so it was hard to properly race. And someone decided that you needed to race with Seagulls on it because they were matched in power, and go all the way around Bermuda so you had a mixture of conditions.
And after that, the Devonshire Bay race started every year, but your boat had to be moored in Devonshire Bay. So every year of the race, a whole bunch of little Clorox bottles would be seen all over Devonshire Bay with somebody's boat on it. And, well, it's there. You can't say that it's not in Devonshire Bay. It's been there like for a week. So they started doing that, and it just picked up from there.
I don't think there is a record of who won. I've tried to talk to some of the old timers that claim to have been involved in the first race, which would have been the first organized one after that, and none of them seem to know either. It's way more of a recreational thing than a serious sort of competitive thing. It's the lighter side of sports, for sure.
The race kind of lost participation for some reason, I have no idea. So it moved only because we decided it was too much of a hassle to get all our boats to Devonshire Bay the night before the race. It was just too much. And then it just picked up from there, more and more and more. And now we're up to, I think our biggest sign up was 76.
The race itself is like no other boat race. It's unique in that, A, it's not a sailboat, and B, an extremely underpowered boat. And two men have to be pushed with the weight of a boat by a 5 or 6 horsepower engine. There's no other race that really underpowers a boat like we do.
Seagulling is a unique sport because not many people in the world choose to race with a Seagull outboard. It's a very low horsepower, slow moving motor. In New Zealand, they'll race with one person. Ours has always been two, and I guess that's because you gotta have someone to talk to, right? If it's gonna be 11 hours, you don't wanna do that alone. And I guess that's another thing about it that drives the design of the boat, because there's a fair bit of weight with the second person. A whole design that is for one person and just that limited weight can be very different in terms of how much buoyancy it has to have and the shape of it. It could be shorter and beamier and ride more on top of the waves. So I guess that's kind of driven our designs as well, just having that second person in the boat.
There are other locations that do race Seagulls. In New Zealand, they race them on rivers, but it's a slightly different race. It's a longer race, it's on fresh water. They go with the current, I understand, and it's a one-man race. That makes a big difference. So it changes the whole dynamics. Seagull racing in Bermuda, it all started with dinghies and big old heavy Bermuda dinghies and take you 8 hours, 9 hours to get around. And it continued like that for a number of years. And then it was spoiled by, I believe, Dr. Nash, who made a boat that was completely revolutionary for the time. It's called the Screaming Flea, and I think he went around at that time in just over 4 hours. And the closest boats behind him were sort of 6 hours. He was the first one to build a thin, light plywood hull. And with a small engine, an underpowered vessel, weight is a critical factor. If you can take 50 pounds out of a boat, you'll gain a mile an hour. That boat's actually still racing. It's a 40-year-old plus plywood boat, and it still is quite competitive. From what I understood from my father, people weren't very happy with that sort of paradigm shift because it got so competitive, I think. And it's progressed since then. We just went around last year in 1 hour and 51 minutes with 2 men in the boat and 6 horsepower engine. So we're getting very advanced with designs of boats now.
When I started racing, I was using boats that were not purpose-built design boats. They were just any boat I get my hands on. And the noise, being in the sun for so long, I decided it was time to try to cut the time down a little bit and be a little more competitive. Compared to other motorsports, this one here, it's really Bermudian technology that's sort of the winning combination. Boats that are designed and built in Bermuda are the fastest. Some people have had hulls designed overseas and brought them back here to race, but typically the boats that perform the best are boats that are Bermuda designs. And it's interesting because a lot of pictures of our Seagull boats have ended up on international blogs and naval architectural pages. And to hear the pros talk about what we've done is quite interesting, actually. One of the designers actually came here and had a look at what was being done here and went away and designed and built something. And after his boat got beaten by our boats, I think they had a whole new level of respect for what we're doing here. There was nothing wrong with his design from a practical perspective. It was a stable boat, it was fairly light, but it just wasn't gonna cut through the waves like ours.
The boat design of the Seagull is incredibly unique. Certainly the water conditions dictate that. We go right around the island. So it's 42 miles, we think. And we've got the flat calm of the North Shore and the waves of the South Shore to deal with. So you can't have a sort of lake boat that's super fast in calm water and then is a dog on the South Shore. So you've got a bit of a compromise. You've got to have a boat that's fast in all conditions. And there are so many permutations and ways to do that. And if you do 10 different things that gain you 1/10 of a mile an hour, that's 1 mile an hour difference. And that's a couple of miles lead at the end of a 2 to 3 hour race, right? So I always love that, just tweaking and pushing the envelope just a little bit, just a little gain, and the constant experimentation that you have to do. I guess that's what appeals to me about it.
Awesome. Okay, cool. All right, let's get rid of these and see what happens.
A lot of people who have built boats have built several. You try to improve on it as you go. Also, when you see someone beating you, you try to look at what he's done and incorporate what you think made it good into your next design. I've always built out of real cheap plywood because always you build it, you try it, you know what's wrong with it, and you want to build another one. And if you spend a huge amount of money on that, then it's kind of prohibitive. As far as designs go, that's evolved a bit. Typically, we've gone towards the long, skinny boats, more towards a wave-piercing bow, because you want to run level in the water. If you're pitching up and down through the sea, you're going up, you're going down, and the prop is being moved so much in the water that you're losing efficiency. So early on, we all recognized that for a very low horsepower engine, the longer the boat, the faster you generally can go. And the idea of penetrating the wave in front of you and keeping the boat running level evolved. So a lot of the new boats employ a wave-piercing bow, and it's smooth, and you don't have to do a lot of bailing because you're cutting right through the water. It's not splashing in on you. So it's actually a very comfortable ride and a practical design for this. But there's got to be a cutoff point at how long you can go before the actual length of the boat and the wetted surface and the skin friction slows it down. And I believe that that's around 30 foot. I don't think much longer than that is necessary.
Let's go, Bob. Let's charge, because we got to roll boats over and stuff. Got her. Walk towards you.
How many boats have I made for this race? I've made 1, 2, 3, and we're on our 4th one now.
Okay, put it in.
Other guys have made far more.
Yep. So as you can see, it's pretty light.
The first boat we made was called Assault Weapon. Assault Weapon. The second boat we made was almost 34 feet long and about 27 inches wide, painted black. So it's that wide and 34 feet long. And we called it Chopstick because of water, the chop, the waves, and stick-like boat. And the one we made last year was our ultimate boat, so we called it Game Over. And we did it in computer graphics like the old Atari Game Over stuff, because we thought it was going to be a pretty revolutionary boat made out of carbon fiber, and it did. It took 17 minutes off the existing record.
This is how we store a Seagull boat, in the dirt over the year. Well, it's about as good as that's going to get, I'm afraid, camera people. But there she is, carbon fiber. Twill weave and 1/4-inch foam core in here, and another layer of carbon fiber. And it's ultralight. Can we lift Salt Weapon? This boat I used to think was light when I first made it, until that one. This one actually is quite heavy. Can we get this over to Cedar Tree? Oh. I guess we're turning that way. So this one is 50 pounds heavier than that one, and this one's only 24 feet long. It's made out of foam core and fiberglass, but not vacuum bagged, and it's overbuilt.
These two are about 140 pounds.
They are, aren't they? And that one's narrow. That one's an inch narrower than the other, but because it's longer, it's far more stable.
You try and get into Salt Weapon and it's a production. You've got to do it in one specific order to not capsize.
A lot of Seagull boats suffer from this. As you try to make it lighter and lighter, the rigidity suffers. And the twisting motion, the only way I could get rid of it was to put these cross frames in there, which everyone laughed at on race day, like thought, what's the scaffolding for, until we came across the line first again, Right. We've won in all these boats.
Chopstick didn't win his first race.
Not the first race, but we won the second one. Yep.
So there's this constant upgrades and innovations being tried every year. And the construction and design is, for the most part, by a method called stitch and glue. You take plywood, you cut it to the shape, and you draw them up and stitch them together with wire or pull ties along the seams. And then you basically fiberglass tape in between and pull those out, and you've got your boat shape. These guys can make these boats in a weekend sometimes. Now we've gotten into foam core with carbon fiber. By the same sort of method, stitch and glue, get a mold out of plywood and then make the boat from that. Bermuda doesn't have a lot of boat building going on anymore. There's no one building Bermuda dinghies anymore after Mr. Pitcher in St. David, so everything's fiberglass and imported. You'll find a lot of Seagull building because these boats rot very quickly. So the degree or the rate of deterioration of the flimsy plywood hulls dictates that we have to kind of reconstruct every couple of years. So there's a healthy amount of boat building in the Seagull sport. So Seagull racing does keep alive the tradition of boat building in Bermuda, although the boat designs are quite untraditional. but there is constant upgrades and innovations being tried every year. So it's quite stimulating, quite alive, really.
Can you undo the... No, I'll do that. Yes. This one is a rowboat, so we kept it. But yeah, usually, because you build a new boat each year, or at least some people prefer to, yeah, you do throw them on a bonfire, but we actually kept the one from last year because I expressed interest to race again. So it's really depending on what you want to do the following year. Most other boats are fairly quiet. Sailboats are very tranquil, but with the Seagull you've got this pounding roar going on because it's quite an old engine. So that's the main difference that I found. My name's Russell Conyers and I go to Warwick Academy. And I guess I got involved with Seagull racing through my dad, who is an avid Seagullian, and he's been pushing me to go with him since I was a little child, and he invited me along one year and I really enjoyed it.
I'm Claire Conyers, and I also got involved the same way. My dad, he's been doing it for as long as I can remember, and Russell started doing it and it got me interested. So I eventually went. We've grown up on the water, and so all our lives we've been around boats, so we're familiar with sailboats and always being out and about and on the water and everything. And I think the experience is great because you have the wind and the waves in your face and everything else about it. And it's interesting because it's not something you do every day, so to get out there and do it is great.
We used to use the 5R engine, which is a more modern version, on a smaller punt that we have, but that one was just a real pain to start out, so it usually only comes out once a year because it is just an archaic engine mode, and the newer ones are just far easier to use. And it is traditional. We haven't put any pipes or tricked it up or anything. It's pure.
There are three main Seagull classes. There are the traditional old Seagull classes, and those would be engines like the Silver Sentry Plus, Sentry 100, and the old 102 models. And these motors typically have a lot of brass parts on them and chrome, pretty antique looking. I mean, it's a distinct look. Then the new motor class consists of motors like the Kingfisher, the Osprey, the 170, which came with an engine cover, the 125, which came with an engine cover, and the 5R, which actually has a Yamaha lower unit on it. And these motors were sort of the next generation in design for Seagull. I think they were attempting to quieten them down a little bit, make them a little more fuel economical, reduce the amount of oil that had to be used in them. So this was sort of the next generation of motors. And then that was followed by the Seagull Sport, which is the Selva 6 horsepower motor is what we're using. Selva essentially manufactures the motor and they're rebranded for Seagull. So that's your basic three engine classes.
As you can see from the engines behind me, they're a very, very basic model. They're not very advanced. There's no baffle system in them, and it's a Victorian design. There are slight upgrades here and there, but the design hasn't changed much. And they have no exhaust system, so their noise is quite distinct. And it's a ting, ting, ting. So there are bumper stickers out there that say, you know, Seagull Racing, the real ting. Seagull went out of business in the 90s and they sold to an Italian company, Selva Marine, I think it's called. So the later Seagulls are actually not Seagulls, and it's a bit of a contentious issue in the Seagull racing world. The Seagull racing is classed according to whether you have an old or new engine. Old Seagulls as these guys back here, and then there's the Sport engine, which is the Italian-made Seagull. And the only reason we're allowed to race the Selva engine is because for the first year or two of production of the 6 horsepower Selva, it actually had Seagull on the cover. It's a very contentious issue. They don't like the fact that we've got these fast, Evinrude looking engines, but we're here to stay.
Okay, so we have a few Seagull motors here. The traditional class, my favorite class. I just like the look of the motors. They're sort of real Seagulls, as opposed to the spaghetti Seagull, which is the sport series. And for a while, we weren't allowing these because they were spaghetti motors. But in the interest of growing the sport, these were allowed in. And this is what's the biggest class. You can see the huge difference from the old brass stuff to the very modern. I mean, this looks like a typical outboard motor. This motor's 70s, 80s. It's got parts from a lot of different motors. This was my attempt at putting what I thought was the best sort of combination of parts together. Typically, the crankshafts can't handle a lot of speed. When you rev them high, they'll just start coming apart on you. And if you've been around them and you've pulled a lot of them apart, you know what engines have what parts and what are better than others. So the crankshaft in here has needle roller bearings on it, and it was from the Kingfisher. And it seems to work. The record's been there for 10 years, so.
Modified is a broad word in the Seagull race. There's a lot of contention with modified. Modified to most purists means that you've taken a different part off a different engine that it doesn't belong on and put it on your engine. I try not to change. I try to use parts that will work and they're compatible, but not giving me any edge. I don't like the faster engines. The newer engines do not last. I don't see them going much further unless somebody decides they want to spend a lot of money and bring in a lot of parts. So I think we'll go back to where it started. Back to old engines, I think, because it's just easier to maintain. You can actually make parts if you need to. But on the other hand, they still allow them now because there are new sports series and modified series. So they allow them because speed, but they have to go in a speedier class.
This motor is actually Jason Seamus's motor, and up until the year before last, had the record for the sport class until JJ broke it with the long skinny thing he's got. And he only broke it by 3 minutes. So I'm pretty confident that this motor will again have that record. It's a very, very fast motor. It's been modified just a little bit with a carburetor, but everything else is exactly as it was from the factory. It's crazy how it goes, but we had 3 of these that were virtually brand new. We tested them, and this one was by far stronger than the others. So there is a huge range in how these motors run, and it's one of those lucky motors that it's just good.
What we're into now, Bob and I, is just the extreme sort of racing, trying to go around faster than anyone has before. And we're in a class which is unlimited, so you can modify the engine in any way you want.
Come on in. This is the workshop. Here's our secret weapon engine over here. We're extremely proud of this. This is technically a Selva engine, but made in the first couple of years. Stock engine and block with a modified carburetor and things. And what they didn't like that we did last year is put this muffler on it. That's a completely customized expansion chamber muffler. And it looks pretty big and strange, but this thing is pure science, I tell you. It's all to do with the lengths and the rates of change of the flare and the expansion parts. It's water cooled. We can modify the temperature of the exhaust gases in here to change the whole dynamics of the thing. We spent a lot of time. Actually, Brian Lightbourne was the mastermind behind most of this. But he and I spent a lot of time altering, tweaking lengths, flares, all sorts of things. And we probably got another 20% power out of this thing. So that's going to be another almost 2 horsepower. And you can, if they're perfectly designed, get 30%. So we barely got a mention winning last year because the modification was actually obvious rather than concealed within the engine. I don't ever like modifying these guys because you can't get them anymore. But the newer Italian-made ones are still being produced to some extent. So if you make a mistake and ruin the engine, it's not destroying a piece of history. Yeah. Bob and I will probably race a couple of more years with that engine until we're satisfied that we can't go any faster, and then probably degenerate down into the dinghy class and just have fun.
I probably have upwards, probably 25, 30 engines. People go to the dump and find them and bring them to me. Guys come by and say, oh, do you want to buy this engine? I found them in people's houses and in their basements. And a lot of them are just trash. I just buy them for parts because parts are hard to come by since they don't make them anymore.
Seagulls are fairly rare now. The manufacturer hasn't been making them for a number of years. Typically, back in the day, you would find one in your grandfather's garage. And that's what I started out with, my dad's motor, and raced that for a lot of years before I started sort of scouting around and finding parts to build my own. And actually, there's probably still an awful lot of Seagulls in people's sheds that are forgotten, that just need to be dug out and put into use. The latest motors, the Sport series, they've actually stopped making those now as well. So it's going to become harder and harder to find an engine from now on unless the class opens to allow other motors.
This year's race was pretty amazing in so much that we had 70 boats register. It was a beautiful day, pretty calm. Unfortunately, I think because it was low tide, a lot more people went aground than I hoped for. So we had 72 boats start, but only about 36 completed the course completely. Some we had to say, come in early, cut through, cheat, come in under your own steam, and the rest of them, unfortunately, had to be towed in, went home, whatever. My name is Martine Purcell. I'm the treasurer and organizer of the Seagull race. But that's 8, but today I had 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, I only count 8. Yeah, but I got 9, so I got one more. My job is management. They needed somebody to take control and organize things, and so I actually held meetings and minuted everything to make sure that they all knew what they had to do beforehand. So now it actually runs quite smoothly.
Martine Purcell, probably the godmother of the race. She's been involved with it for a lot of years, and she's got amazing patience and incredible organizational skills. And somehow, with 60 boats finishing a race, she's able to very accurately determine who won what classes from the mess of data. It's pretty amazing what she can do. So I take my hat off to her. She's certainly the matriarch of the sport, and we all appreciate her very much.
The rules of the race is very simple. You keep the island to your left. No cheating, that means no wind-abled things like sails. They go around anti-clockwise, and the biggest rule is do not go through a bridge. Some of the boats take over 8 hours to complete. So I always say, I do not want you out there at dark cut through Castle Harbour, just tell me that you didn't complete.
The idea has always been that you want everyone to finish the race around the same time. So the slower classes obviously leave earlier, and that's like 8 o'clock in the morning, and the faster classes leave 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so that you're all finishing around 5 o'clock. Because really, that's what's exciting about the race, is passing people or being around the other boats. So you really want to have everyone finishing sort of around the same time. So the duration of the race depends very much on what class you're in. I think the longest time around was 11 hours, which is quite a long day. Some of the old traditional wood dinghies with old motors on them can take 8, 9. And if you're in the faster classes with an expansion chamber on a very long carbon fiber boat, is under 2 hours. So anywhere from 2 hours to 11 if you have problems.
I was one of those 7-hour voyages, my first time. It took a long time to go, and I came out of the boat red as a lobster, sunburned. And it was in a really small boat, and it was quite stormy, so it was a great initiation. I really got a feel for it.
First time it took 4 hours, I think, and I had heard stories of people being in the boat for like 7 hours, so I was surprised. It went by really quickly, so it was good.
And it's really beautiful going around seeing the reefs and the different houses and the beaches. It's an angle that you never really get otherwise, because if you're out on the boat, it's generally to look at the water and not to look, back towards Bermuda. So looking at the cliffs and the different houses and really funky buildings, and on South Shore there's a nice interludes of white sand. And the reefs are also a lot closer to the surface, so you can kind of look down and see the labyrinth beneath you. It's like living in a travel brochure. It's really nice.
The Seagullians themselves are a mixed crowd. You've got the absolute dedicated people, really mad keen on these lovely old engines. Some of them restore them. You've got the other ones who just like speed. They're not interested in the old engines, which are designed to go slow. They build their cigarette boats, and they will do absolutely anything to hang on. And the others are just there for the fun. We have a cruising class of the sports engine, and they just take their own time. They will stop off at Blackbeard's and St. George's for lunch, get back in the boat. And that's the other thing the Seagullians have to do. Don't forget, they're 8 hours out on the water, drinking, having a good time. So there are no toilet breaks or anything else like that. So, you have to be dedicated to want to do this.
Completing the race, I guess, depends on how organized you are at the start. Breakdowns are not uncommon. If you're a person who takes his motor off the boat after last year's race and leaves it in the shed and expects it to work the next year, then you may not get around. Little things like rust in the water jacket, you only need a little flake of rust to break loose from the water jacket and block up the hole that allows the coolant water to go through, and you're going to run into some problems. It'll heat seize on you. So something as simple as that, just not being prepared. Some of the heavily modified motors, if you're spinning an engine at 7,000 RPMs and it was designed to spin at 5,000, something could break. So flywheels shearing off, crankshafts breaking on some of the modified motors can happen. But they're pretty dependable engines if you take care of them. With a fleet of almost 60 boats last year, I think there are probably only 5 that didn't make it. So I think that's pretty good odds.
We've had a breakdown. I don't remember where it was, but you just see all the other boats going by and you're stuck. And there's Dad sitting next to you, and he's like telling you what to do and just ordering you around, and in the moment you're kind of panicking and you're like, oh no, what do I do?
Off South Shore, you've got to have someone up on the bow to spot where the breakers are so you don't run into a reef. So I was staring at the reefs, and we were in a really small boat that was about 2-inch clearance from the water, so we were getting quite a lot of spray. So Dad said, Russ, look, I'm gonna let go. So he'd let go of the tiller, and we were just kind of curving off towards land. He was bailing madly while I was just watching for a reef, so that was intense, which is quite good because you go around South Shore first. And then when you round near Fort St. Catherine, you can kind of breathe a sigh of relief because there's no reefs to watch out for. It's much calmer, and you can just kind of do a straight cruise home.
Had a boat, a small 10-foot dinghy. I called it the Lickety Split. And this boat was so tippy that you move just a tiny bit in the boat and you were on your butt or overboard as it ended up. And at one point, something went wrong with the engine, the tiller dropped out, and I ended up going over the side. And then, of course, the boat rocked so much that my partner went over the side. And thank God the engine cut out, or somehow we stayed with the vessel, but somebody went by and all they saw was our two matching straw hats floating on the water. And nobody in the boat, and everybody was very concerned that, you know, oh my God, what happened to these guys? And we just popped up and got back in the boat. And that's the year that we ended up taking 10 hours. Mostly because we stopped a bunch of times and fell out twice.
There have been 1 or 2 times where people have sank. I've sank. I sank on a perfectly calm day, and I don't want to talk about it. It was the year before last. And we were doing really well, my daughter and I was letting her drive for a while, so we passed each other a few times. And while we were doing that, we dished water in, and we weren't aware of how much. And pretty soon it was too much, and we just sank. And it wasn't her fault either, although I blamed her. Now she races on her own, so yeah, you can sink as well.
I remember being on South Shore and the waves are just coming over you. You do get splashed in the face a lot. Towards the end, when it's really windy and you're sitting in the boat and you've been there for hours and you're kind of thinking, when am I gonna get out of this? But it's all a part of it.
If it's windy on South Shore, it's much calmer if you can actually get outside the reef, and then you can get like a half-mile off. But usually you try and get as close as you want just for safety purposes, because the engines do break down quite frequently, and it's always good to be stranded close to shore rather than drifting.
There are loads of crash boats. There are some that follow the fleet. There are some that are just stationed along the way, and you're usually never far from one. So there's a huge committed group of people that come out and they're there for you, you know.
We've had many prizes donated to us over the years. There's Prix de Moran trophy, there's Douglas and Fossey. There's people think up categories for the prizes, they donate it. In total, about 15 trophies that get given out.
The ugliest engine to finish belongs to Legless. Chris Hands.
Prizes for best boat names, the longest fish, heaviest fish, for the smallest fish.
Next up is the trophy for the longest fish. Jay Castling.
One of the prizes is the best dressed boat and crew. That's the Chummy Cup, which is Douglas and Fossey. He always used to go out in a dinghy. It had the old dinghy mast, and he used to decorate it up in flags. So if anybody bothers to dress up and the boat is dressed up as well, then they win the prize. You have the Canadians who come in every year. They come visiting local people. They got involved. There was a challenge, the Bermudians versus the Canadians. So now they dress up every year, whether it be in silver curly wigs, funny glasses. Got to be Canadian, of course.
Clicquot is our boat. This is our 8th Seagull. Made it all the way around. Had a great day today. Beautiful day. It was a photo finish, so I gotta go upstairs.
So yeah, we do this every year.
It's a challenge between Team Canada and Team Bermuda every year. So
there's a trophy. It's a Buddha trophy, and it's got every year who won. And this year we're gonna, because Bermuda, Mike, get in here, Mike.
Pull that tie down now. Pull that tie down. Straighten yourself up.
Oh, geez, am I a mess? Well, you're telling me now.
I have quite a few trophies, but I go out to have a good day on the water, enjoy myself, make sure my boat doesn't get damaged. As far as I know, I've not broken any records. I am the only person that's actually gone around with 2 old engines on the back and finished with them both working. But winning is a bonus, that's all it is to me.
My father and I were first across the finish line one year, so we did get a prize for that. And it's a really great atmosphere because it's a general party atmosphere going on and people are having a really good time. There is the prize ceremony and it's just nice to see everybody who successfully finished the race sharing in the fun. This was the first prize, yes, first in our class. So there's prizes overall for the fastest time and there's also prizes for your class. So we were first in class E2 in 2011.
And mine is second for 2011. And you get the free Heineken hat and the Seagull shirt, which is great because it's a memory and you can wear it and be like, I did that.
The biggest thing that we do is we raise money. All of our profits get donated to something green in Bermuda, to promote Bermuda youth on the water, something green. We only have it once a year because I can't handle anything more than once a year. I also get people coming up to me after the race. They give me a hug. They go, Marty, thank you so much. We had such a great time. So it's the pleasure of seeing them having pleasure, and that's the pleasure I get out of it. I also see a lot of people, and it's nice.
I'm actually going this year with a friend of mine in my dad's boat, so it's the first year I'm doing it without parent supervision. And she's a first timer, so we're gonna see how that works out. So we've got an engine, got a boat sorted, got my crew, just waiting for the day.
Children are very sought after commodities in seagull racing, and the reason for that is they're super light. So yes, you'll find that parents are always trying to entice their little ones to gain an interest in the sport, purely for selfish reasons, but also it's a really cool thing. I really look forward to the day when my daughter and I can probably take a little dinghy around and have some fun.
A lot of my dad's friends are really involved in it and they have kids, and so they're also involved in it, and we've become friends with them through that. We joke around with our friends, I'll be in the boat with my dad and then my friend will be in the boat with her dad, and it's just kind of like, oh,
watch out.
How's this gonna happen? And you kind of have an idea of what's gonna happen because you know the boat and you know whose boat's gonna be faster, but there's always breakdowns, which happened last time. And actually, one of my friends was in a boat, and you know, her boat was really fast. And
kind of
our
watched
boat,
them go by.
yeah.
Oh, man.
But then they broke down, and we were like, yeah.
You'll have maybe 2 members of one family do it, alternating years. Like the Lightborns, I've seen Dylan and his father do it, and his father and his daughter do it.
Me and my sister have done it since we were little with our parents. It's my first year going out on my own with my mate. It's her second year.
Personally, I have a daughter who raced last year in a boat that I designed that a friend of mine built called In the Pink, and she loved it. Both my kids have been racing with me from the time my wife would allow them, and they're committed to it. They love it. They love the legacy. They want to, you know, work on boats, build new designs. They want to build a fleet, apparently, and you know, it's great.
It's a fun event. It's just a lot of people together enjoying what they do.
It's a classic race, a real Bermudian race here.
Just
for
going
here.
out there having some fun. You'll see everywhere.
And it's great to be able to pass on something that you thoroughly enjoyed as a kid, and hopefully they'll pass it on to their kids as well.
In the Pink, Danielle Lightborn, her father maintains the engine and he keeps it up to pristine levels. He always tests it beforehand and then he follows around just to make sure his daughter makes it around. They won the first 2 ladies who go around the island.
Next trophy is the Harris Williams Shield, first all-female crew in the Pink, Danielle Lightborn.
There was no record broken this year, which surprised me, being it's so flat. David Seamoss built an engine which his son runs, and he managed to split the record, but no records were broken.
There's always a little bit of a rivalry, friendly rivalries between groups that are competitive. Personally, I have a whole lot of respect for Michael Beanie. The guy designed a boat called Slippery, and very good mechanic. He has the record for the new motor over 16 foot. And I've tried to break it a couple of times, and it's not a serious thing. I look up to him and you know, what he's done with that class.
Rivalries are all over, especially amongst the faster. JJ Soares is like everybody's trying to beat JJ because JJ is the man. He's now holds the record. He's got the light boat, the long boat, but every year all the long boats and the fast boats are changing. They're trying to get longer boats, faster boats, lighter boats because they're all trying to win. I really have no rivalries myself. Like I said, I just try to go out and have a good time. And if you want to come after me, well, off you go, try your best.
I think there's definitely some character building involved sitting in a boat for 7 hours with a roaring engine. Patience, I think, is learned, and a sense of humor is definitely required to survive. It's just kind of something you need to take with a pinch of salt and a good sense of humor. So you go out there ready to get wet, ready to get sunburned. It's something that you just kind of take in your stride, and if you can do that, then you're always going to enjoy yourself, no matter how hairy, scary things might seem.
The ingredients to be a successful Seagullian: perseverance, I guess, moderation, because it is a long day, certainly a sense of humor. It's good if you can swim, if you can tolerate the sun, and if you're going to be there for 11 hours, wear a hat, for sure. But yeah, I think perseverance, and that's probably the case for any sport, you know. If you want to accomplish things, you got to stick to it and keep trying, and yeah.
Seagull racing probably does develop a special sort of character. But I think really seagull racing attracts certain characters. Rather than create them, I think it totally attracts the problem solving and the testing and tweaking. I like that sort of thing. There are boat addicts out there who just like everything boat, and I'm one of those too. And then there are people who just enjoy cruising and that sort of stuff.
The future of seagull racing. That's an interesting question. I would like to see it grow more. So we encourage people to come down and see it. The enthusiasm is there. There are, of course, the stalwart crew who do it every single year. They started racing, doing the challenges, doing the various different groups, and they're determined to beat their records. Now, as they've got older, they've tried to bring in their youth, their children, and other people have seen what's fun and seem to have put it on their bucket lists. To go around the island with a very, very noisy engine in a slow boat. So now we've got a good broad spectrum of people who want to do it, and I think they have fun.
Advice for seagulling people, or want to be seagullers: learn your engine, find a small craft of some sort, go around the island before you even think about doing this race. Get a feel for being out for a long time. Make sure you take everything you need, come out and enjoy it. It's a great way to see your island. How many people can say, I've seen this whole island from the outside? Nobody, except for us, of course, because we've done it so many times. So I think it's great, and I just hope it stays on course and stay live.
I see one of the challenges as being the motor and the availability of parts. I mean, there's still a lot around, but if nothing's being manufactured anymore, then obviously over time, as parts depreciate, it's going to get harder and harder to get the equipment together. I have my reserve of parts so that we'll never be without an engine, and that's the way to keep it going. And I think a lot of the people that are really serious about it, that are passionate about it, have put aside special parts so that down the road they'll at least be able to still come out competitive.
What's involved in keeping a Seagull engine running? Not much. It's been said by enough people that these Seagull engines are so well made and so reliable that you can literally use them as an anchor and pull them up and start the boat and get home with it. Too bizarre to be true, but apparently they're pulling them up still out of the beaches in Normandy, and they're still getting them to run. Simplicity is the hallmark of a Seagull, especially the old ones. It's a cylinder, a spark plug, some points, a coil, and a flywheel, and there's not much to go wrong. This is my dad's engine here that we tuned around with when I was a boy, 8 years old and up, and it still runs, and I've done not much to it. They're terribly abusable, and that's why we have Seagull racing today. If the engines didn't have such longevity, we wouldn't have it, obviously. Yeah. It's a little Seagull joke. There's a little boy had a Seagull engine which he was trying to start, and he came across a vicar, and the vicar had a shiny new pedal bike. And the little boy said, "Oh, I really like your bike." And the vicar said, "I actually need an outboard engine," as vicars do. And the little boy said, "Well, look, I'll trade you my Seagull for your brand new bike." The vicar was very generous, and he said, "Okay, make the little boy's day," and he said, "Okay, fine." The vicar gave him his bike, and the little boy said, "Okay, go ahead and start it." And of course, the Seagull, they're notorious for not starting the first time. So he was pulling on this engine, wrapping the cord around. He's starting to work up a sweat. He's pulling on this thing. It's not starting time after time. And the little boy said, "You know, With seagulls, see, in order to get it to start, you have to swear at them a little bit. And the vicar said, oh, you know, I don't swear, you know, I never swear, little boy. And the boy said, don't worry, keep pulling on that engine and you will.
I think that with regards to motorsports, Seagull racing is quite accessible. If you can get a Seagull and you have a little bit of knowledge of how to take care of that motor and you can design and build a boat, then you have a good shot of performing very well in this race. We've seen other types of powerboat racing diminish over time, and this is a sport that seems to still be growing. There have been lulls here and there, but I think it's really catching on. There's something for everyone. If you want to really race, then you can get into that sort of a class. But if you just want to go a casual ride around Bermuda and have fun, there's a class for that as well. There's a fishing tournament, so if you just want to fish, that's good too. I know sometimes I'll be driving along and a fry will jump in the boat, and I'll carefully put him to the side, because now I can enter the fishing competition, you know? So there's a whole lot more to it than just the competitive part of it.
My hopes for the future of Seagull racing is just that it's maintained, that it keeps going, and I think it will. It's a plywood boat, a cheap old engine, and it's not dangerous either. 5 gallons or 6 gallons of gas will take you around in a Seagull race, so it's relatively inexpensive, low risk kind of sport, and good old fun. So that's probably why it attracts all the numbers, and I think it will continue. I can't see many changes other than design changes, but the spirit is going to be the same, certainly.
It's a very unique Bermudian thing. I've not heard of it going on anywhere else in the world. So you get a bunch of these unique individuals doing something that we only do here, and I don't think you can help being proud to be Bermudian when you do something like that.
Many years ago, they used to sing and dance all the way from Somerset to St. Jude. They used to sing and dance as they went along, singing a happy but a teasing kind of song. What they singing, man? They go like, all the way from Mangrove Bay. That's where all the old maids stay. All the way to Crowley Cider. Nothing there but foolish pride. What you say? Spanish Point, half a gallon and half a pointer, all the way to Devonshire Point, brackish water and rotten corn. Man, you say that's funny, man. They used to sing and dance as they went along, yes, singing a happy but a teasing kind of song. Yeah, man.